Hello YouTube. As many of you have unfortunately not heard, thanks in large part to the pro-abortion and pro-Obama media bias, last Friday, Obama, via an executive order, reversed the Mexico City policy, which protected American taxpayers with moral concerns about abortion by banning all public funds to international family planning organizations that perform abortions, give advice on how and where to obtain them, and advocate looser abortion restrictions in the countries they're operating in. The policy was first enacted by President Reagan in 1984, also via an executive order. Was rescinded by President Clinton, also via an executive order in 1983, and was revived by President Bush, again by executive order. It's gone now, though. Thank you, Obama. President Obama's recent action, of course, does not surprise me because, as I pointed out in parts 6 through 12 of my anti-candidate video series, Don't Vote for the Douche or the Turd, and will point out as many times as is necessary, Barack Obama has the most radical pro-abortion voting record of any mainstream presidential candidate in American history. Because not only does he share his party's sick love affair with taxpayer-funded abortion on demand throughout all 9 months of pregnancy, but even voted not once, not twice, but 4 times if you count the time he blocked a vote on the Born Alive Infant Protection Act to leave babies born after failed abortion attempts to die in soiled linen closets. And the cowardly manner in which Obama rescinded this reasonable policy by doing it behind the American people's backs and then pretending as if nothing happened is also not a surprise to me, as I've also pointed out in parts 6 through 12 of Don't Vote for the Douche or the Turd, Barack Obama lied on multiple occasions about his record on abortion by flip-flopping on his stance on late-term abortions, by claiming that he opposed them when he has not voted even a single time, even since claiming this to restrict late-term abortions, and also lying about his votes for infanticide by saying that he would have voted for the Illinois state version of the Born Alive Infant Protection Act if it had the same language as the federal version of the bill, because such language would supposedly be necessary to protect Roe v. Wade, when most, if not all, the versions he voted against had language almost entirely identical to the federal version. And, of course, there is his incestuous relationship with Planned Parenthood. Need I say more? Supporters of taxpayer-funded abortion on demand, of course, utilize an almost endless laundry list of lies and absurdities to justify this shameful robbery of the American taxpayers. But there are 3 in particular that are the most devastating. The first one is one of the oldest political tricks in the book. You take an issue and attempt to exaggerate how good or bad it is, more often than not bad, by making it sound really scary. The best example of this is Hitler comparisons. While on occasion appropriate, and I don't apologize for the ones I've used, and will not take them back, are used in far too many cases where they are not appropriate. Let's say, for example, John has a mustache. Well, Hitler also had a mustache, so John must be as bad as Hitler. Joe likes bratwursts, and Hitler also liked bratwursts, so Joe is as bad as Hitler. I don't know whether or not Hitler liked bratwursts, but you get the point. This has been done with the Mexico City policy by dubbing it with the epithet of the global gag rule, which comes from a parliamentary procedure often used by dictatorships posing as democracies, like Iran or Vladimir Putin's Russia. I know Putin's not the president now, but, well, let's face it, the guy that is a puppet. To effectively bar a particular issue that is inconvenient for those in power from being discussed or even acknowledged. It is a classic case of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. The legislature of Malaysia has a gag rule against any member proposing the repeal of its racist laws giving certain societal privileges to the Bumiputra, or ethnic Malay citizens, which are denied to all other ethnic groups in that country. And the United States Congress had a gag rule from 1836 to 1834, which forbade Congress from taking any further action on the massive number of anti-slavery petitions which it has received in those years, which thankfully did the opposite it intended, and inspired even more anti-slavery petitions and activism, and may even have ended this evil of slavery sooner than it would have otherwise. According to this warped logic, even the slightest restriction on the funding of abortions, overseas or otherwise, is every bit as much of a violation of the abortion pushers, family planning organizations' right to free speech as the other gag rules I mentioned, by conveniently ignoring the fact that although they couldn't perform abortions or give referrals for abortions on the taxpayer's dime, except in cases of rape, incest, and the life of the mother, they were still able to do so with impunity thanks to the efforts of the United Nations, the European Union, and other international organizations and governments and corporations sympathetic to these glorified death merchants. Now, I know some of you are going to say, oh, but these funds don't go to abortions or abortion rights advocacy, which is half true. Yes, even without the Mexico City policy, abortion pushers couldn't legally use the taxpayers' funds they were granted to perform overseas abortions or abortion advocacy. But the taxpayer funding they will now be granted, thanks to the Mexico City policy's repeal, will still enable them to perform more abortions because it would free up some of the money from other funding sources, much of which they will use for more abortions. This is every bit as disingenuous as suggesting that using taxpayers' funds to fund the Ku Klux Klan on the condition that they only be used for after-school programs will not encourage racism, when even if the funds are not being used to lynch blacks, at least not directly, are still freeing up some funding for that purpose. We don't fund the KKK for that or any other purpose, so why is it acceptable for conditional funding for abortionists, which, let's face it, are just as bad and possibly even worse than the KKK? Now, some of you are going to persist by saying, oh, but that doesn't matter because the funding decreases the number of abortions. Bullshit, it does. It does not decrease the number of abortions. It is basic economics and equally basic common sense that if you subsidize something, even if it is indirectly, you will get more of it. If you need proof closer to home, then just look at the catastrophic failure of the almost endless amount of Wall Street bailouts, and you'll get your answer. This is Blade H 86. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Abortion President's Inaugural. Until then, see you guys.